So if you're an activist and if you believe in American jobs, I don't care if you're left, right, blue, green, center. If you think wages are important in this country, if you think the manufacturing sector is important in this country, now's your time to speak up. I don't know how you can be for jobs and be for fast track and be for this agreement. Mr. President, I am totally puzzled by your position on this. Good evening, Americans, and welcome to The Ed Show, live from New York. Let's get to work.
I am out there negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
The TPP, as I said, will bring 40% of the world's economy. The world's economy together.
This is another NAFTA disaster waiting to happen.
This has been a good deal. Both have become more competitive in the world marketplace as a result.
And there is a tooth fairy and there is an Easter bunny.
Trans-Pacific Partnership, which has an ability to be able to raise standards of doing business.
Let's look at reality instead of theory.
Well, I can tell you that Trade Promotion Authority is a priority, not in theory, but in fact.
The middle class is being offshored.
Literally millions of jobs have been lost, have been sent offshore.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. Oftentimes on the radio, I hear that the Democrats don't do a very good job of communicating. How come that we always lose the arguments on things? Here's a dandy for you. This is a winning issue for independent thinking Americans. You know, those folks that you go home to and see elected officials that they're not left, they're not right, they just are for America. If you are for American jobs, you have to be against fast track. You have to be against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It is a bad deal for American jobs. So Democrats, here's what you can do. You can go home and say, we didn't get it done with NAFTA, and we're not going to get it done with the TPP. In fact, NAFTA is nowhere near as good as the TPP when it comes to destroying jobs, right? Here is the bottom line. Who is going to be able to go home and say, I stood up to my president because I protected American jobs. I stood up to President Obama because I didn't want to see jobs outsourced. We're finding out with this issue who's for the worker, who's for industry, and who's for big business. I can't get the Republicans in the Senate to come on this program. We asked Rand Paul, got no response. You know why? Because the Republicans don't want to be on the wrong side of the corporations. The Democrats, most of them, have figured this out, that it is about workers and the middle class. The Senate held a bogus one-sided hearing today on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So tonight, we're setting the record straight. Earlier today, the Senate Finance Committee held a hearing on fast track of the TPP. It's important to mention that no specific details of this trade agreement were brought to light in this hearing today. Everything was mentioned in very generic and general terms. The TPP is still, to this moment, the best kept secret on the economy in this country. Senate Finance Committee Chairman Max Baucus, who I'm not a fan of, I don't think he's for the workers. He wants fast track and he wants it now. He wasted no time coming out in support of this trade agreement.
Workers in factories that export earn nearly 20% more than workers in factories that don't export. Businesses that export create jobs more quickly, and they are less likely to go out of business. So how can we help create these jobs? How can we get more American exports into foreign markets? Through trade agreements. And to complete trade agreements, we need Trade Promotion Authority, also known as TPA.
Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Senator from Montana. That's only half the story. To have trade, you got imports, and the balance is simply not there. I don't believe what Mr. Baucus says when he talks about wages. I'd like to, well, I'm going to have to call his office tomorrow and find out where he's getting that information. Pretty generic, because we have lost 60,000 factories in this country since NAFTA. Baucus claims that the TPP will create American jobs. That's easy to say. Show me the money. History speaks a much different language on this issue. No free trade agreement has ever created American jobs. Every time a trade agreement is passed, American jobs are outsourced. This is what's gutting the middle class, the economic engine of America. Sure, it's good for the people at the top, but the flatline wages are because of crap like this. This was not, by the way, a balanced hearing. No fairness here. The committee heard from 3 business owners who support Fast Track and the TPP. The only opponent was Larry Cohen, who is the president of the Communication Workers of America. So, of course, Max Baucus, he's controlling things. He's our new Darrell Issa. Supporters of the TPP said that the deal would make it easier for businesses to export goods.
And today, our international sales are growing in many countries. However, the playing field for trade isn't always level. While our market is generally open, U.S. exports face foreign tariffs that often soar into double digits, as well as a thicket of non-tariff barriers. Now, as you've heard, I'm not from Washington, but as we've already heard today, TPA will require Congress and the White House to work together on trade agreements. Well, that doesn't sound like a radical notion to me. And those trade agreements will tear down the foreign barriers that shut out products made by companies like mine.
Oh, here we go again with only half the story. Tariffs. If we're just as equal as some other country in this trade agreement, why should there be any tariffs whatsoever? Well, the bottom line is it's about wages, and there has to be a level of protectionism in this deal for American workers, or we're going to become like them. Our economy will be like theirs. Supporters claim that the TPP would lower tariffs in other countries on our exports. Senator Max Baucus, you know what he used? He used a 40% tax on U.S. tires as an example. Pay attention.
I might say, just for example, it's not in your business, but like Malaysia, for example, has a 40% tariff on tires, and we have a big export business. The United States exports tires overseas, but they've got 40% duty on American tires, and Malaysia is doing an agreement with other countries, which means other countries nearby, Indonesia and others, will not have to face that same 40% tariff.
Where in the world have I heard that before? Gosh. Oh, yeah. Back in 1993, when NAFTA was being debated, I seem to remember Vice President Al Gore using a similar argument.
We make the best tires in the world, but we have a hard time selling them in Mexico because they have a 20% tax collected at the border on all of the tires that we try to sell. Now, when they make tires and sell them into the United States, the tax at the border is 0.
Yeah, now we're getting it. Here's what that trade deal got the United States. NAFTA alone cost this country 700,000 jobs since January 1st of 1994. Supporters of the TPP are also worried about the United States being left behind in the global economy.
Economic growth and jobs increasingly depend on the expanded trade and investment opportunities available worldwide. The global economy will move forward with us or without us. The U.S. is not in the vanguard of pursuing new agreements. We risk falling behind other countries that are pursuing agreements of their own. We also surrender the opportunity to negotiate new rules to address trade barriers and issues that did not exist previously.
I say stop worrying about what the rest of the world is doing. Start thinking about American jobs. Free trade agreements have devastated local communities in the United States. CWA President Larry Cohen made that very clear at today's hearing.
We must document the likely net effect on employment. These micro examples are wonderful and we applaud them. But what is the net effect? What has the net effect been of 20 years of these trade deals? What has happened to our jobs, our communities, the North Philadelphia that I grew up in, the Cleveland that I can picture right now? Devastation throughout those communities. Nowhere near the replacement in jobs for the more than 700,000 jobs lost from NAFTA alone. Even the Korea trade agreement that was supposed to bring new jobs. In fact, we've lost 40,000 more jobs since its passage.
No response from anybody on the panel from that. Cohen also said trade agreements like the TPP have wiped out entire industries in this country.
We could take micro examples like telecom equipment. There's no telecom equipment made in this country at all. And yet, what do we have today? What did we have when we grew up? We had Bell Labs. We had Western Electric. We had Lucent. Every one of those hundreds of thousands of jobs is gone, and yet we're the biggest consumer of those products. And yet China with state-owned enterprises, ZTE, Huawei, and European companies that are promoted by their nations, whether Alcatel or Siemens or Ericsson or Nokia, are thriving.
Oh, yes. He said we're the biggest consumer of those products. We're a big customer. You mean to tell me that we can't play hardball at the table when it comes to trade agreements? If there's a big customer in the room, don't you want to do business with them? We're giving up. We're giving way too much. We're not protecting our workers. We can have a level of protectionism and still have free trade, but it's got to be fair. I'll side with the workers over business on this one any day because profits are through the roof. And I'm sure profits are going to continue to go up for corporations if this deal passes. Even more. But don't be fooled. Those offshore profits, you know where they're going to sit? They're going to sit offshore, and the conservatives are going to protect those tax dollars offshore that should be into our treasury. So they want the whole thing. Meanwhile, wages are going to be depressed for the workers, and jobs are going to go overseas, and we're going to have this thing called long-term unemployment continuing on unless we invest in jobs in this country, which, of course, the Republicans don't want to do under the Obama administration. The TPP is bad for workers. No Democrat should support it. Workers need to stand up across this country and go after this issue. This is the death knell for the middle class in America if fast track is allowed to go through and the TPP just washes right out overseas with jobs. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question. Do you think your next door neighbor knows about the TPP? Text A for yes, text B for no to 67622. You can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We're bringing the results later on in the show. For more, let's bring in Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator, good to have you with us tonight. Thank you so much. Let's be clear on this. Why was there limited testimony for those who opposed the trade agreement?
Well, look, historically, as you have pointed out in your discussion, this thing has been a stacked deck that corporate America has pushed through trade agreement after trade agreement with enormous lobbying efforts, campaign contributions, and these results, these trade agreements, have ended up devastating working families and enriching large corporations. So sadly, historically, what we have seen is Republicans and Democrats coming together for disastrous trade agreements, which, by the way, are partially responsible for the fact that in the last 13 years, we have lost over 60,000 factories in the United States. Not all trade, but trade is a significant reason why. What corporations are doing is saying, why should we pay an American worker 15 or 20 bucks an hour when we can go to Vietnam, we can go to China, and in Vietnam, the minimum wage, Ed, is 28 cents an hour.
Yeah.
Why are these corporations going to invest in America and create jobs here when you can go to Vietnam?
So how can anybody make the case that this will create jobs in America because it will increase our exports?
They keep saying the same thing over and over again, trade agreement after trade agreement, and they're wrong every single time. Look, will this trade agreement create some new export jobs? The answer is yes. Will it lose far more jobs because companies shut down here and move abroad to capture cheap labor? The answer is yes. So we gain a little, we lose a lot. And over the years, as a result of these trade agreements, that's the trade agreement with China, that's the Mexican NAFTA agreement, CAFTA agreement, we have lost in total millions of decent paying jobs, adding the pluses and the minuses together.
Senator, what's your response to the parallel argument Max Baucus is making that Al Gore made in 1993?
I mean, it is, they keep saying the same thing. And yes, again, there will be some increase in export jobs, but we lose more than we gain. And I get tired of hearing these same old arguments. The bottom line here is, look at all of the trade agreements. If they have worked well, if the middle class has grown, if wages in the United States have gone up as a result of these trade agreements, I'm all for it. But the converse is true. Not only have we lost millions of jobs, in terms of manufacturing, and you remember, manufacturing used to be the highest paid blue-collar work in America.
Yeah.
People can make it in the middle class. As a result of these trade agreements, we're in a race to the bottom. Manufacturing wages have gone down precipitously.
Well, the argument that's being presented from the Secretary of State, John Kerry, is that this is going to make it easier to do business. I don't argue with that. It's not a question about whether it's going to be easier to do a deal with another country. It's what are you going to get in the deal and what is your economy going to get out of the deal? And this is where the administration and the president has been void of explanation on this. Who's going to call them in the Senate on a carpet to explain to the American people before we get into this thing?
Some of us surely will. Look, this is going to be a great deal for the pharmaceutical industry. They can make huge profits by selling their medicine at very high prices in countries around the world. Yeah, they're going to make money. I can recall Jack Welch. Do you remember Jack Welch used to be the head of GE? What Jack Welch said, he said, if I had my druthers, I would put our manufacturing plants on a barge and take it to those countries where wages are lowest. This is what these agreements are about, allowing corporate America to shut down in America to go to low-wage countries.
All right, Senator, take us through the Senate minutia on this. Okay. It's all up to Harry Reid right now, is it not? I mean, he has the power to keep this off the floor and fast track not be an issue. What's going to happen?
Well, I can't predict what's going to happen, but this is what I will tell you. This is what the process is. This is interesting as well. To go forward on this TPP will require 60 votes to get fast track. What's very interesting to me, Ed, if we want to raise the minimum wage, if we want to extend unemployment benefits, we need, for final passage, 60 votes. If fast track is passed, guess how many votes we will need for final passage? 50 votes. So the fast track concept is a terrible idea, prevents members of Congress from offering amendments, provides just for 50 votes for final passage. I hope very much we do not bring this bill to the floor. If we do, I hope it's defeated.
And it's going to be very hard for the conservatives, where they're concerned about sovereignty in this deal, but it's going to be hard for them to oppose it because that pits them against the corporations. And this is why Rand Paul and some of the other big shots on the Republican side of the Senate, they don't want to come out and talk about this. They do not want to. They don't want to go home and say, hey, I helped you outsource some jobs.
But you know what's very interesting? There are a lot of grassroots Republicans who understand exactly what unfettered free trade is. They have seen jobs in their communities disappear and go to China. They are sick and tired of going to a store and not being able to buy a product manufactured in the United States of America. So the Republicans had better look at their grassroots, not just at their corporate campaign contributors.
All right. Senator Bernie Sanders, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Keep up the fight, my friend. Why are we spending time on this? Because once this deal goes through, you can't unravel it. You're not going to end up be able to amend it or change it or make it better for our economy. Once it's done, it's done. They said the same thing about NAFTA. We'll get that tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. So if you're an activist and if you believe in American jobs, I don't care if you're left, right, blue, green, center. If you think wages are important in this country, if you think the manufacturing sector is important in this country, now's your time to speak up. I don't know how you can be for jobs and be for fast track and be for this agreement. Mr. President, I am totally puzzled by your position on this.